Just going to start this again. So this morning there was a official teaser announcement from Tamron of a new big lens that's going to be announced on the 22nd of April. But the only information that they gave us was that it would be a big lens and there was a rough silhouette of said lens. So I put some polls out on my community feed on YouTube and also in a big Sony Facebook group asking people what they thought the lens was going to be. And just now I was halfway through filming a video surmising that I didn't think it would be a direct 100 to 400mm because that would risk classing with the G Master lens, and that whilst most of the people in the polling want a 150 to 600mm lens, as do I didn't think that was going to be the case because the front of the silhouette didn't look big enough for it to be a 600mm, and so I thought it was going to be something like that, but not quite that, and maybe the apertures would be a little bit different. And now I've just seen they've leaked the first images of the new Tamron 150 to 500mm f5-6.7. Thank you very much, you bastards. In fairness, at least I think this is very good news. The majority of the poll that I did was people hoping that this would be a 150 to 600mm lens, which is something I've seen people crying out for forever, really, in mirrorless. Back with DSLRs, there was 4 of them. Tamron releasing the first one, which was very popular, then Sigma followed that up with a contemporary version to combat the Tamron and a sport version to be a higher quality version, and then Tamron counteracted that with their own G2 variant. But for Sony, squat. The closest Sigma came was the 100 to 400, which Sony have also done with the G Master, but 400mm, not 600, obviously. The closest that anyone's got really is Sony themselves with a 200 to 600, which covers the focal range and is a fantastic lens, but it's also very expensive and really goes out of the budget for a lot of people who would otherwise like to buy a 150 to 600. Like yours truly. I used to own the Sony 100 to 400 G Master, brilliant lens, but didn't really get enough use to justify the price point. It spent most of its life just sitting around on shelves. So I sold it and decided to get the Sigma contemporary version for only like a quarter of the price and hook it up to an adapter. And whilst not quite as smooth as a native lens, it does do a pretty damn good job, to be fair. Incidentally, I will be doing a review video of this lens and how well it adapts onto Sony mirrorless cameras, hopefully in the not too distant future. So if you're interested in seeing that, make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Now, obviously, this might be a bit null and void now that Tamron are coming out with a native E-mount super telephoto lens, but we don't know the price point as of yet. Although there are 1 or 2 aspects about the leaked specifications of that lens that do surprise me, and I can't work out whether it's going to make the lens less user-friendly or better. So, in terms of specs, obviously 150 to 500mm. Good, very usable focal range. Obviously doesn't quite reach the 600mm that we're used to, but realistically I think that difference is going to be fairly minimal. Aperture range of f5 to 6.7. Again, apertures are slowly starting to creep up, I've found. It used to be with first-party lenses on DSLRs, they'd all hit 5.6 and no lower, at least at the widest aperture, because the autofocus systems generally would work up to 5.6. Then as AF systems improved to f8, you started to see like third-party manufacturers pushing it slightly to f6.3. Now we've got Tamron with this going to 6.7. Canon themselves with their 100 to 500 have pushed to 7.1, even to f11 on the 6 and 800mm primes. So I've noticed that those apertures are starting to slowly creep up. Obviously the cameras are getting better, so they can autofocus with smaller apertures, and the ISO capabilities are better as well, so you're not going to notice the noise. But background separation is going to slowly start to kind of rein itself in a little bit. Anyway, Where it gets a bit more interesting is the actual tech specs of the lens itself, because the first thing I noticed was the proposed weight of this Tamron lens, 1725 grams. That's only a fraction lighter than the Sigma Contemporary. The manufacturer's specified weight of that lens is a little over 1900 grams. However, the reviews that I've seen where they've actually weighed it say it weighs 1800 grams. It then states that the tripod weight is 155 grams, which I'm presuming isn't included in the 1725. I'm guessing the 1725 grams is the lens itself. So even though the lens is 100mm shorter in focal range and has a slower aperture presumably throughout the range, it's not that much lighter than a DSLR telephoto lens, which I thought was very surprising, especially given how much Tamron have been pushing smaller and lighter lenses in recent years. In terms of said size, it's an 82mm front filter, which again was surprising because up until this point, all of their lenses have been 67mm. The physical size of the lens, they say, is going to be 93mm wide, so a fraction narrower than the 105mm of this, but that's 105mm across this wide front section here, which doesn't exist on the Tamron. So I imagine the barrel of the Tamron is going to be roughly the same size as this. And then length 210mm versus 260 for the Sigma, which doesn't include having the adapter on the back. So I'm going to wager that the difference really is, imagine that this huge front section here wasn't part of the lens. I reckon if you imagine that, and you've pretty much got what the Tamron is going to be. And that's what surprises me. The fact that the Tamron is going to be quite a bit smaller than a 150 to 600mm and yet not that much lighter. And I think the reason is to do with the fact that the Tamron is slated to have 25 glass elements in 16 groups, whereas this lens has only 20 glass elements in 14 groups. So there's going to be a hell of a lot of glass in this Tamron lens, which is going to up the weight. So even though the lens itself is a lot more compact than this, it's going to weigh roughly the same. Now that's got me thinking, I can't decide whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. Is the fact that it weighs so much going to put people off? Would they prefer a lighter lens? And why have they gone with so much glass? Is it because they're struggling with the image quality that they needed to put extra glass in? Or is it that they've gone balls to the wall for the best image quality they can get, and this is going to be pretty amazing throughout the zoom range? Now, no mention on price as of yet, but I do think it's going to be significantly cheaper than the similar offerings from Sony, based on the theory that everything from Tamron so far has been significantly cheaper than the similar offerings from Sony. And I don't think it's a coincidence that it's a 150 to 500mm, because that puts it bang in the middle of the focal ranges of the 100 to 400 G Master and the 200 to 600 G series. So kind of follows that same theory that I've had for a while, that Sony have probably heavily influenced Tamron's choice with this focal range to fill a gap in the market without directly competing with really anything that Sony are offering. Now, given the fact that both the 100 to 400 and 200 to 600 are around 1,800 to 2,000 quid, I'm going to wager we will see this Tamron lens for somewhere sub 1,500. Sub 1,000 would be amazing, but I suspect it's slightly wishful thinking. I'm going to wager it's kind of 1,300, 1,400 would be my prediction. Hope I'm wrong, in that I hope it's a lot less. Now, will I be purchasing this lens? Probably not. I'm quite happy sticking with the Sigma for now, but really that's more because I don't actually use that lens all that often. So the rare occasions that I do use it, it does what I need it to do well enough, but I can't really justify forking a load of money on a lens that isn't going to get that much use. If I find myself in a situation where I'm using that lens a lot more, then I may well consider upgrading to a native lens. But what do you make of this new leak? Are you excited by it? Are you likely to be purchasing it? Leave your thoughts and comments in the box down below. While you're down there, if you haven't already, please consider hitting the like and subscribe button, and then hopefully we'll see you in the next video.